my name is Natty, and as you can see from my pink sign, I am a non-feminist. To be honest, I am actually an anti-feminist, meaning I am completely against feminism. But I think that a lot of people don't like being so divisive, so I like to promote the term non-feminist, and so does my friend over here, Rod. He's got the non-feminist declaration, and there are plenty of women out there like me, not just men, who are non-feminists, as in they are not feminists, but they're not necessarily out there being politically against it. I want to talk about why I'm an anti/non-feminist, but if you guys have any specific subject matter, I'm doing this spontaneously, off the cuff, so please shout something that you'd like me to talk about. I'm happy to do that, or ask me a question and maybe we'll just go from there. All right, shall we start with the definition of feminism? Because this is the one that always gets us into trouble, and this is subject for endless debate, because that's why the feminists are winning, because they like to twist and not be genuine or honest about what the definition of feminism is. So feminism is the belief in the patriarchy and the belief that throughout the last 100 years at least, and perhaps the whole of humanity, men have oppressed women explicitly and in an explicit manner and in a complicit manner too, to gain power and control over them. And they have done so through various systems of structure of control in society, through the laws that they may have made, and the attitudes and gender norms that they have seemingly forced onto women. And that is what feminism believes. It believes that men have done this throughout the last 100 years. And so when feminists say that they want equality between men and women, they're basing it on this fact that they believe that men have oppressed women throughout the last 100 years, or perhaps throughout the whole of humanity. So when you hear this lovely, vague, sounds nice, everyone wants equality, it sounds nice, it's a marketing trick that feminists have done, and it's quite effective. I actually give them a lot of respect and props for their use of semantics and their use of marketing. So I would like to talk about why patriarchy theory is completely wrong and inaccurate. So throughout human history, we have had extremely gynocentric attitude towards women, especially in the last 100 years. And this means that we value women's lives and children as well, but more women actually in some cases, over men. So we send men out to war, we send them into the pits, we send them to do the laborious work in society. Men have a ridiculously high chance of dying in their workplace compared to women. Throughout human history, women then, I guess, returned the favour of the risk they had in society by going through childbirth and doing domestic labour, and sometimes doing laborious work too if they were working class. But patriarchy theory ignores this and acts like men's lives have always been privileged and prioritised over women's. It has never fully explained why we have such an empathy gap, a muted empathy gap between men and women. I'll stop for a second. Does anyone have any comments or questions before I continue? No? This guy's loud. Can you hear me over him? Yeah? You can? Okay, good. So, to continue, throughout human history, men and women, men have always wanted to protect and provide for women. And if you think about the state of things in the past, where we had, before the Industrial Revolution, this meant that they took on the burden and responsibility in the household, and perhaps they did go and become a politician, and they may have made laws. But when they made these laws, they were doing this for their whole family, because it was their responsibility to provide and to die for their family. It has never, ever, ever been women's responsibility to do that. Ever. In any society, whether it's more patriarchal or more matriarchal, it's never been a responsibility for women. The only responsibility women had was to look after their husbands and their children in a domestic sphere and perhaps influence society culturally and bring up children, which is something that I think a lot of feminism and other views in society likes to ignore the importance of. So we all know that when you're bringing up children and you abuse them, they tend to become abusive, or they may be traumatized throughout their human existence. Well, if women are in charge of that, they have the most important role in the world, in my opinion. And there is a saying that says, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. And that has been women's influence, primary influence throughout human history, but not the only influence, because women have been the upholders of community and of moral standards and alongside men, okay? But that's been their role. And for us to act like the fact that men might be a politician and a woman may not be in the past, not now, because most of the politicians now are becoming women, or at least going to get that way very soon. You know, to act like that has no importance in the decisions that men may have made in their sphere of influence is completely disingenuous. And feminists have been lying to us about the amount of power that women have had.
Domestic violence.
Domestic violence is a perfect example of how feminists have been lying to us. Okay, so let's start from the beginning of domestic violence industry in this country. So, does everyone believe that domestic violence victims are primarily women? You believe that. Anyone else? I don't think you understand what I'm saying. Do you? No English, maybe. Yes. Oh, okay. So one person believes that most victims of domestic violence are women. Is that just one person here? Because I'm really surprised at that. That's good, if that's the case. Huh? Everybody. You speak for everybody, do you? Okay. Anyone else? Everyone in your group, you mean? In your group of friends?
Yes.
What is the question?
I asked the question, do you believe that most victims of domestic violence are women? You do? Okay. No, it is not true.
Based on what?
Based on a meta-analysis of over 1,000 studies, which I can quote you the authors of, to be honest.
I don't believe it.
You don't believe that?
For 40 years.
I've
been a physician for 40 years.
You're a physician for 40
I've
years.
seen it for a long time. And I've lived in multiple cultures.
All right, when we have this conversation, and the data and analysis that I'm talking about is about the UK and Western Europe. I am not talking about the whole of the world.
Meta-analysis, talk about
It's a meta-analysis of 1,000 studies in Europe and the USA.
In what journal?
Well, I can show you where it's from. He can tell you. Well, the website that you...
Get up on a stool and say,
Hello, darling.
it's a
1,000
meta-analysis.
studies means that there's 1,000 different journals, and here.
And what did it say? That's what I'm interested in.
It says that domestic violence, the perpetrators of domestic violence are 50-50 between men and women. That's a meta-analysis of over 1,000 studies. Can you stop talking about all of the world? Because I am talking about the UK and the West. And no, it isn't irrelevant. No, sir, very much. This conversation and the spirit of evidence that we have is based on the UK and the West. So that conversation...
You're saying the UK is irrelevant. We don't feel that way.
I can tell you where you can find it.
Meta-analysis, where is it?
Okay, so the website you can go to is called honestribbon.org.uk.
Wrote it in a peer-reviewed journal.
They are 1,000 studies in peer-reviewed journals, sir.
Which journal?
I have a book right here. You can have a look.
No one cares.
So, unless you have anything else to say, then please be quiet.
You're the one who's
Playing you. He's playing you.
Stop it, darling.
You're the one who's playing it. I'm sorry.
Let's
Get up
move
the stool,
on.
you don't get to make
That
anything
means
better.
that domestic violence, the perpetrators are 50-50 between men and women. That means that yes, this is true. Over 1,000 studies from the UK and the West and the USA. Western Europe
And all
UK.
around the world, what about that?
We're not talking about all around the world.
Why?
We're talking, because this is the UK, and we're talking about feminism in the West, USA, and well, there are numerous countries where feminism does not have as much influence as the UK and the West, so therefore that's what we're talking about. Can you just say that you don't have any other points to make except for let's talk about the rest of the world?
We hear the question.
That is what you're saying to me right now. Do you accept the thing that I'm saying to you? What? Speak up, please.
I don't really want to speak to you.
But you are speaking to me now, so if you want to speak, you need to project your voice a bit
Oh,
louder.
please. Okay. Oh, okay.
I
don't have
you.
it.
I'm trying to be respectful to you by
Me too.
lowering down, but you're not being respectful to me by raising your voice because we're trying to have a conversation, right? Okay, that's great. So let's move. Oh, hello, sir. Are you going to be loud?
Yes, I will be loud. I want to ask you, do you feel that civilizations go through cycles? Like in the Roman Empire, there was a time where women gained more rights, and that somewhat correlated to the end of the empire. Don't you think that what we're going through is a natural trend where civilization goes through a hard patriarchy, then it becomes more gynocentric, then it becomes extremely feminist to the point where men opt out of marriage because they have no longer the authority they used to, and therefore less men getting married results in less children, therefore less people paying taxes, there's no more welfare state, and then we go through a complete collapse and civil war, and then we go back to a hard patriarchy and the cycle returns again.
He's saying that we may be at a period in society which goes round in a cycle,
Yeah.
a circle or a cycle, where basically we have become so successful that
Abundance of resources.
lots of resources, and therefore that is why we have things like feminism, for example, and that is a natural process that we don't have much control over. Is that right?
Yeah, in many ways.
I have read about that before, and I know that if you study the Roman Empire and all that, then
And it's not just the Roman Empire,
yeah,
almost
yeah.
all civilizations, empires, same trend in a way.
No, well, I think that I can't really argue against that as something that has happened, because it's happened in history, right?
Yep.
I haven't studied that in depth to make any points against it. But this idea that we have no control over what's happening, I'm not entirely sure I agree with that. But I'm not sure really, because have we had a point in history in the past where we haven't explored the empathy gap between men and women? Did that happen in the Roman Empire?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Was there a men's rights movement in the Roman Empire?
Kind of, but it just resulted in men just opting out of marriage and going to vices like prostitution and homosexuality. Yeah, they just no longer.
But was there an actual movement of men, like there is today, that was discussing the empathy gap between men and women?
Not that I know of, but even if there was, it probably wasn't. It was just a footnote in history because it's not in our nature to really sympathise with men's activism as comparison to women's activism.
Okay, so I'm just going to read what he says. He is agreeing with the fundamental point that me and these guys agree, that we, as humans, we don't care about men's lives as much as we do over women, and there is a significant empathy gap between how we feel and care and the empathy we give to women compared to men. And this has always been the case. And are you saying that there's nothing we can do about it?
Well, it depends of how drastic you want to change things, but I personally, I support what you guys are doing, but a lot of people feel like you're not going the extra mile, you know.
What's the extra mile?
Well, take women's rights away, I guess.
What does that mean?
It just means returning to a hard patriarchy, you know.
And you think we actually had a hard patriarchy?
No.
See, I don't even agree that we had a hard patriarchy in the past.
Oh, all right.
But do you think we should go to one?
No.
So what was the suffragettes required then?
Ah.
If there was no hard
So
patriarchy.
the suffragettes, they basically jumped on the hard work of the suffragists last minute and decided they wanted to get a leg in on the action, and they acted like terrorists, which they were. They threatened and sent bombs to people. They were basically a bunch of upper middle class, elitist white women who decided that they would like to have certain, you know, the voting rights and the influence in the political sphere, right? And so can you let me finish my point, sir? Me and you are not going to get along if you keep doing this. I'm smiling at you. Can you smile at me? All right. So, right, okay. So the suffragists had been battling for a very long time to get universal suffrage for both men and women, because before 1918, men who did not own land did not have any rights or voting rights. And the argument that a lot of us will make, and one of the guys in this wonderful book written by a guy called William Collins, which I will show you later if you're interested, he has examined this as well. We would say the only reason that working class men got the vote in 1918 is because of the war. Lots of men were like, why the fuck why should we go to war, right, when we can't even vote? So they gave them the vote. So that's one argument as to why actually universal suffrage came about in the first place. And then the suffragettes jumped on this bandwagon at the time and were like, you know what? You know that they were all politically motivated. That's not just to do with gaining votes, but anyway, that's another conversation. They jumped on board and said, well, we'd like a bit of this as well. And they were not given the same amount of responsibility that men were. So if a man wanted to vote, he had to sign up for the draft, and that meant that whenever there was a war, the establishments, the elites said, hey, you guys got to go to war. They would never, ever, ever ask a bunch of women to sign up and do that, never. So they gained the same rights without the same responsibilities. So instantly when the suffragettes, is that what?
Is that a period or full stop?
I'm good. When I'm finished my point, you can ask the question. You've got to be really mouthy to come up on here. So I'm going to continue to be like that. No, I know, but you interrupt me too, so it's cool.
It's heckling.
Exactly. I expect you to heckle me, and I expect to give it back. All right. So where was I getting to? So when the suffragettes managed to get the vote for women over 30 in 1918, alongside all of those working class men that had never had the chance to vote before, just remember that, okay, that's very important. They didn't have to sign up to go to war, but all the working class men did. So instantly these women gained privilege over all of the other men in society. And those women were already part of the top level of society. You know, I'm just going to do my pyramid sign here, sorry, not Illuminati or anything. But, you know, they were already part of the top 20% of society because they were upper class women. And instantly they just gained all this privilege over absolutely everyone else, including other women. Okay?
I grant you that, voting rights should not have been connected to the ownership of land. Okay, I grant you that. I haven't finished, remember?
Okay.
Okay, but a woman could be of royal lineage. She could not vote. And
Yes,
to say
she
that
could.
was, sorry?
Yes, she could.
So
A woman
why
that
would there
owned
be a
land
suffragette
and vote.
movement?
Yes. He's right. Continue, sorry.
So no woman could vote, or some women could vote?
Some women could, yes. Okay, so I'll give you an example. There's been a whole, prostitution has been around forever, okay? There has been a long line of madams and brothel owners throughout history in Europe who owned land. because traditionally these women, yeah, they owned land, traditionally because they made their living by being a prostitute or a madam, and they essentially didn't have a husband who took on the burden and responsibility of the income. So a man, if he was a landowner and he had to vote, and it was his responsibility. Everything ended with him. If his wife ran up debt, he had to pay it. If his wife did something that was going to destroy the income of the family, it was his responsibility. Everything was his responsibility. So that is the deal that was made in the past for when men owned land or had, you know, the financial responsibility, the provider role. The women were able to have influence over the domestic sphere in their family household, and sometimes working, because we must remember that working class women worked before the 1950s and the Second World War, okay? But they did not have the same responsibility as men. So in a way, they actually had free reign to do a lot of things and make a lot of decisions.
And so prostitution was not exploitation of women in any way, right?
If a madam owns her own house, has her own business and her own employees, how is she being exploited?
The madam did not provide the services. It's all the other young women that were trafficked to provide the service.
So maybe the exploitation was being done by the madam. Maybe. You can make that argument. I don't know if I want to have that conversation right now.
Yeah, it's exploitation of women by women
By
to a
women,
certain
but
extent.
not by men.
The men were the people who drove the industry.
Yeah, there's a
We're not
market for
buying
it.
the
There's a
services.
market for it.
It's a consumer that drives.
Go on, you want to say
A
something?
high-class prostitute.
Hey, wait, listen.
A high-class prostitute could make more money in one night than someone working on the land, a man working on the land could make in a month. And they lived in quite luxurious conditions. And a lot of women
A man working on the land is selling his body.
It's not quite the same, and you know it.
It is the same.
Okay, so the man that's working in the mines, that destroys his body working in the pit, well, that's got everybody that benefited from using that coal, that provided a marketplace for wanting that coal, they're exploiting the male labour.
I mean, if you want to have a conversation about whether prostitution is morally or ethically right or wrong, that we can have that, but if you're talking about it automatically being exploitation, I'm going to disagree with you there,
Do you
because
reckon there's any exploitation
I
based on
actually
gender?
have sympathy for some of the sex-positive feminism, because some of the points they make about prostitution, in my opinion, are legitimate points.
But this guy doesn't. Look, feminists attack liberty, justice, equality, and meritocracy.
No,
So
I
that's just
said-
every feminist, anyone that thinks you're a feminist, you're an evil bastard.
The inherent foundational belief of patriarchy theory is evil, yes. But the sex-positive feminists, because unfortunately one of the ways that feminists have won is they appeal to all different kinds of interests that women have, and they go, we have a feminism for this and feminism for that, and look, we have TERFs, we have sex-positive, we have libertarian feminists, which is an oxymoron, we have anarchists that are because they understand that women like to be collective in nature and politically with other women. And then what they do is they go, okay, this is a legitimate cause that you care about, that you might not necessarily agree with patriarchy theory or even know what it is. They say, join us. We are stronger together. Then they start saying, to be active with us, you have to agree with all these other things that feminism does. Okay? So it's just a way of getting control over the narrative and politics and lobbying. That's what I mean. If you talk to sex-positive feminists and the TERFs, the ones that are against trans and all that, they're all fighting with each other now because it's becoming abundantly clear that they have foundational beliefs that are completely separate from each other, right? They're enemies. But up until now, it's been in their interest to lobby for certain things under the banner of feminism.
Fair enough.
So I've got a question for you guys. How do you plan on stopping feminism?
How do I plan?
No, this whole, I assume you guys are together in this, right? You must have kind of a plan if you come with a sign, if you come with an idea.
What am I doing right now?
No, but this is, okay, but this is very vague. This is very vague. This is just coming to speak as Kone spreading
What
awareness.
I have just said
Fair
is
enough.
not vague.
Huh?
What I just said was not vague. They were very precise points.
Yes, it was.
Okay,
But this just...
there is a political party.
I know.
Okay, so with the political party, they're trying to take action to actually raise awareness of this.
Give him a list.
Justice for men and boys.
Give him a list.
Does it have a place in the parliament?
No.
Does it have spokespeople?
Of course not.
Yes, it does have a spokesman.
We do have a spokesman. In fact, the leader of the party is Mike Buchanan. He's right over there. But we do have one politician who actually talks about some of these issues, and his name is Philip Davies, MP. So if you would like to support anyone who is doing something politically, then he would be the guy. I'm a big fan. I'm not a fan of the Tories, necessarily, but he is Tory.
Other actions that have taken place, there was the International Convention for Men's Issues that was held this year in Chicago, and it was also held previously in London, which is again taking action to try and bring people together that are supporting the men's rights movement so that they can look at the different actions that are being taken and support people and promote their work.
Okay, so if you're interested, you can join Justice for Men and Boys. You can join Justice for Men and Boys if you would like to fund that, or you can join. You can fund and there's plenty of other groups that are doing things. If you would like to contribute financially, or I don't know how you would like to get involved. This is how I'm involved. I would love to create a non-feminist women's network. If you know anyone who wants to give me some money to do that, then give me a call or come and chat
Now
to
we're
me.
talking.
Okay? So that's what I would like to do. That is what I'm trying to concentrate on. Yeah.
Are you okay with men stating that they identify as women and then taking part in female sports events?
No.
And why are you against this?
Because even if someone goes through transition, they still have, physiologically they still are a man, and they also what's the word? They're still at least 40% stronger than a woman physically, so it's not fair. But you know, in a way, I don't put my time towards that issue because the intersectional and pro-trans lobby that had aligned themselves with feminists, they got themselves into that trap, and so they can fucking just deal with it. I don't want to stick up for them.
So you sound like a reasonable person, but you know, looking at your non-feminist declaration, it's full of conspiracy theories.
Such as?
Well, they're attacking liberty, they're destroying families, lives. I mean, there's so many tall claims per square inch.
Just pick one and discuss that.
I can't even tell you which one.
You're not a very good
Demonstrably baseless conspiracy.
Someone else heckle me. He's heckled me already. It's someone else.
The family court.
Why don't you answer my question?
About it. Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm from YFSS.
Hello.
Hey, man. I'm like,
Think about a specific point, heckler, and when you've thought about it, I'm happy to discuss, but I'm not going to
Feminists
go
have been
engage in
responsible for
made a
have
comment
exacerbated
everything
facing
that
humanity.
you believe is wrong, so you know.
The problem.
Please do.
When we're talking about upper class people when only the landowners had the vote, why do we assume that the woman, the landowner, the wife of the landowner was some kind of little fading woman? Has anyone ever met wealthy women? They're quite formidable people and they're very opinionated and have enormous social power and also social connections. And who's to say that it's not the wife who decides the politics of the family? And often it is.
I'm not denying that they had influence, but they always had to derive their power through the man.
And you know what? Which feminist said that it basically is not the responsibility of women to go and do the real work. The reason why feminism should exist, and this is a famous feminist, She said the reason why it should exist is so that women can have the freedom to be creative and do as they please and control all of the men around them. Okay? So she was quite supremacist in her views. But to be honest, I'm just saying that she let the mask slip for a minute when she said that in her book. Okay? She was basically saying that she is completely happy for men to continue to go out there and do all the backbreaking work for civilization, and she thinks that's a good thing. She does not want real equality. Never wanted it. That was not the stated goal and aims of her and any of the feminism has ever existed in the first place. Right, and I'm going to remember it in a minute. But, sorry, I can't remember her name.
Women, I don't think they want equality with men. I think they still want men to go out and do all of the tough work, and you know, I also think men don't want women to go out and do the tough work, because then, you know, there would be no place for them to do that.
Of course, everybody pulls the blanket to their side.
So George Bernard Shaw, you've heard of him, of course. So in one of his plays, a wealthy noble woman says, can I have £5? Because that was the cost of a typewriter. The only job a woman of breeding could get was to be a secretary. Where, well, he wrote in the 1900s, late 1800s, 1900s. So the men controlled.
Secretary in the 1900s.
What's that?
Really? As in, I'm just
Early, like in the
I don't
transition.
Repeat what you're saying, so I'm getting what you're saying.
So this woman says, can I have £5? Because that was the cost of a typewriter. Because the only job that a woman could honorably do was typing. And so women had no access. They had no access to means of production.
Was this a middle class woman? Okay. So, was this middle class woman concerned about all of the working class women beneath her who were working on the land or the farms alongside their husbands sometimes? Even in the coal mines, they worked in the coal mines with their husbands too sometimes. Was she concerned? Did she go, you know what, I want a job. Why don't I go out and work on a farm, be a seamstress, be a teacher, which was always, that's been a woman's job for a long time as well. Why didn't she do any of that stuff? She decided that she wanted to be a secretary. But there was plenty of other options for her. And I'm saying that the reason why she would have asked for £5 is because, yes, her husband would have been the one responsible for the money in the household, but also he had the burden of it too. And if he said to her, yes, why don't you become in charge of the money in the household? Okay. Now, I'm going to say that most of the time, the women were in charge too, but the responsibility and the burden, meaning if they ran into debt or they had to go to court, it was the husband, not the wife. If he said to the wife, why don't you take on the burden and responsibility of the debts in the household, what do you think she would say? Would she say, yes, please, I would like to take on this soul-crushing responsibility? Most women would say no, unfortunately.
I'm trying to answer you. So I grant you that the men took the responsibility, right? Even today, in today's society, men still
pay most of the taxes.
They still are schooled, are still conditioned to have the responsibility, right? But the women didn't have the option. They just did what they were expected to do. And today women are bringing up children and being the CEOs.
And being what?
And being the chief executive officers. They're bringing in the money, gladly taking on the responsibility and functioning, doing the
That's
back.
the doctor, which is what country's got the
So
biggest
I just want to say this.
What country does that have? Sorry, before you say what you say, what country has the biggest men's rights movement?
Say again?
What country has the biggest men's rights movement
No
in the
idea.
world?
India.
India. And we know those guys.
I actually know about that.
Okay,
I know a
you do know
I
about
know.
that.
I can tell you a few things.
Okay.
But let's just talk about women not wanting to advance in the ranks, in business. So it's actually quite interesting.
I know plenty of women that have, I know lots, I have known plenty of women, and I currently know plenty of women who are expressed to me in their private moments that they have this pressure and they signed up to a whole career, and then when they become a mother, they are less interested, they don't want to do it, they find that they're pulled all over the place, and they're quite like a job with less responsibility that's part-time, so they can prioritize family life.
I'm intimately familiar with that. In a department of 100 faculty, 60% of the assistant professors are women. 10% of the professors are women. And
wait. Yeah, no, I'm just. When I do this, I'm not trying to take over, because your voice is quieter than mine. I'll do this for the rest of the crowd, okay? Go.
So it's not entirely voluntary. That's the point. That the system is not set up for women to succeed. The system does not recognize childbearing as a social responsibility, and it does not give them any freedom to do that. And ultimately, many women are pressured to take on part-time jobs. And a part-time job is the worst kind of job, because you still end up working full-time for a part-time salary. So it's not entirely voluntary.
I didn't say it was entirely voluntary, but I know that they make the choice, okay? And they feel internal conflict generally about the whole issue. And we don't have an honest conversation in the media or on any of our institutions that discuss this. We don't have genuinely honest conversations about it. All the responsibility and the blame is pushed towards men and the patriarchy and the system, as you have quite rightly said.
It's a systemic issue. Is
Yeah,
that we
but
haven't.
Who caused the system to try and do this in the first place?
Not women.
Feminists.
No, it wasn't.
Not all women. Feminists.
Why are we all so obsessed with trying to turn women into men?
Not all.
No, we're not trying to turn women into men. We love women the way they are.
If men are the major workers, what's the problem?
When Adam delved and Eve span, who was the gentleman? Right? Right? I mean, Adam and Eve worked together. So there was never a question that the man should do all the work and have all the responsibility. Where is that? It's only because men control land and the means of production that they arrogated this to themselves.
So we discussed earlier that before 1918, the majority of men did not control land. The majority of men were working class, plebs, serfs, and they had no vote, no voting rights. They were told what to do by the elites like everyone else.
But the majority of the land was controlled by men.
It was controlled by families.
I think the man is the tool of the woman.
The man is the tool of the... We
How
discussed
she
this
gets what
already.
she
The
wants.
man who may have owned the land had the burden and crushing responsibility, and he often had a rich wife next to him who had lots of influence on the decisions he made.
Excuse me, what about the thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of women that have to go to work? They have to. They are. If they don't go to work, the families don't eat. You can't say that it's a feminist issue. It's a question of just having to do something to support your family. You could be married. You've got a husband.
I'm not a feminist.
No, I do.
Okay, excellent. So what I'm trying to say to you is that the condition now is that everyone is expected to go to work. In the past, that was also the case for a lot of the poorer and working class in society too. It's never changed for them. It's always been like that. But we are told a narrative that before women got the vote and for the 60s to 50s or after the Second World War, that women were not working, they stayed at home. And they didn't do any work. That's not true. That is a fake narrative that feminism has promoted.
So you are a feminist. Look
No,
at you.
I'm not a
Well, you
feminist.
say you're not, but yet you're obviously self-possessed enough to stand on here in public. Well, no, but you're not a shrieking violet, are you?
No.
No, exactly.
Do you think that women before feminism were all shrinking violets?
No, but isn't that the narrative? And moderation in all things. Don't go to ridiculous extremes in feminism where you terrify everybody. nor be some horrid shrinking little violet which says yes husband. You know, it's just treat people as equals, really, isn't it?
Do you think that before feminism, that women were shrinking violets?
Well, that's what they're encouraged to be.
But do you think they were actually like that?
A lot were, yes.
Yeah.
Too many were brought up. Oh, don't talk about
I'm
that.
not sure
That's
that
the
a lot
boys
of
to
the
talk
working
about.
class pub owners, public house owners in the past were shrinking violets. And I'm from a working class background. It's very unlikely I would have been a shrinking violet in say, the 1800s.
But yeah, what I'm saying is
Very unlikely.
you're quite clearly a fairly self-possessed young woman. I can say young because of my age.
What does self-possessed mean?
Well, then you have the courage and confidence of your opinions.
And is there an implication that that's a negative thing?
No, not. There's a positive. But you say you're not a feminist, but maybe your definition of what feminism is different.
What is your definition of a feminist?
Well,
oh, thank you, darling.
at its worst,
Keep talking.
at its worst, it's the sort of person who takes offence at everything that any man says. No man can do anything that's right. If he says, "Good morning, love," immediately he shrieks and howls, you know, right?
Thank you, Bob.
Whereas, and that sort of thing, which I can find
That's
quite...
very vague. We need to get down to the fundamental belief that all feminism has. And all feminists have.
Well, you tell me, because I'm not studying
It's
that.
belief in patriarchy theory, which is that men have oppressed women for the last 100 years and possibly throughout the whole of humanity.
That's possibly going, yes, that's going too
That
far.
is what feminism
Is
believes.
it?
Yes, and if
I
you
thought
call
it was
yourself
all-
a feminist,
I thought it was
then
about-
you are saying that you believe that and you agree with it.
No, but I do certainly believe that women have the right to take part in life and get involved in politics and be Prime Minister and get rid of Boris Johnson, all sorts of useful
Women
things.
have been involved in politics, as we discussed
Oh, I know, yes,
earlier,
yeah.
throughout human history on a local level.
So you're saying the feminism that you're objecting to?
No, not the feminism. Feminism, all types of feminism, believe the same thing about patriarchy theory. Some of them more extreme than others. So the radfems might say that it's because of men's biological makeup. The Marxist feminists might say it's because of the system, the oppressive system. So there's slightly different variations of extreme, but they all believe the same. They all have the same core belief. Okay?
Men are wicked and women are
No, that men have oppressed women. The one that men are wicked is more radical, and that is now bled into a whole bunch of things because the radicals got control of the narrative, to be honest. But most people, I would say, believe in this notion that men and women should be equal, which is what is marketed as feminism, right? But the belief underneath that is that men have oppressed women. Not that the elites oppressed others, men oppressed women. You can't sit around and tell me that a working class man working in a field is oppressing a middle class woman who owns land and lives in Chiswick. Okay, yes. So what I'm trying to say is if there's any oppression that was going on in the past, it was done from maybe the monarchy or the elites, okay? The landed gentry perhaps, over everyone else, men and women included. But the levels to do with this, that I would argue, is that women have always had more social power and been valued their lives over men. So if you think of a pyramid, right, I'm going to do my Illuminati sign again, right? At the top of the pyramid, you have the top 1% of people who have power and influence in society, men and women, their families, okay? Then you have the next 10 and 20%. Middle classes below that, right? Now, change that. You've got the top small percentage of men and women, or men. Then you have women beneath that, and then all men beneath that. Because women, their lives and their beliefs and their opinions are respected more than most generic working class men. Most men, there is a huge empathy gap against most men in society. Most people couldn't give a shit about most men. They think that they're like shit on their shoe.
So what would you say to a woman in Afghanistan or one of those dreadful countries, where they are treated like slaves and they have to walk around in a tent?
I would say that the situation in those places, when I discuss this feminism, I'm talking about the West and the USA and possibly the countries from the Commonwealth like Australia that have had the influence of the empire in the past. Okay, that is what I know about.
The civilized world, in other words.
I'll leave that comment. I will ignore that for a second. But what I will say, and I don't want to get into an in-depth discussion about it because it's not something I'm an expert on at all, right? So I'll be blindly talking about this. Is that in some of the Islamic countries, because Afghanistan was taken over by some radical Islamists, and I have to speak quietly, let's speak in the corner, because they might turn up any minute. Right, don't. As soon as they turn up, I want to move on. I don't want to talk about it, right? And you know that if you see a woman being treated like a slave, then the man is being treated worse.
Is he?
Yes.
Well, certainly his mind has been corrupted. I'll give you that.
Because our humans are inherently gynocentric, and they value a woman's life more than they value a man's. Okay, and so when you have these oppressive cultures, right, and you see a woman being treated in a certain way, turn and look at what her husband is being treated like, especially if they are poor and working class or something.
Well, certainly in those countries, yes. I mean, their idea of poverty and ours are very different. I mean, they know what poverty really is.
When we will start shrieking this country about enforced marriages and stuff like that, arranged marriages, enforced marriage, everyone always talks about the woman. What about the man? He's being forced into a marriage too. Why does no one care about what his situation is?
And I know, I have actually read a little bit where young men of 18 or so have been forced.
And there has been
they get married to a girl they've never met before. They don't even know what to do, you know, on the day. You know, they are so
let's
ignorant.
move on from this, because we're at Speaker's Corner and those people dominate sometimes, and I don't want to talk to them.
Okay,
but let's move on to something else to do with feminism. Anyone else?
Look at your manifesto and say, justify.
Ask the manifesto, please.
Look at your manifesto and say feminism has caused.
Right, which bit do you take issue with?
Okay.
Be specific, otherwise I'm not talking to you.
In many countries, virtually all institutions have been deeply corrupted by the feminists and people in positions of power owing to feminist influence. That's a sweeping generalization.
Is it?
Based on, in many countries, virtually all institutions have been deeply corrupted by feminists. What is the basis of a statement like that? How do you get away with saying that?
I'll give you something to support this. You know the UN, the United Nations? They have a lot of influence over many countries around the world, right? Do you agree with that? They give funding. So their arm that gives funding, UNESCO, for example, there's many other NGOs associated with the UN. On their charter, they have this whole dedication to improving the condition of women and girls. They go into poorer countries, for example, and they say, here's some funding for a well in a village. To do that, please teach feminism in the school. That is happening in many places.
Well, what's an example of that feminism?
That is true.
What's an example of that feminism that they're asking them to teach? What are some examples of what they would say?
Okay, let me just try and think of the one I'm thinking of.
There is no basis for that.
No, but just let her answer the question, because it's an interesting question. So what's an example of that?
There's no basis. I'm sure if you did less than 5 minutes of research, you would find that
you're on a pedestal saying that, so I'm just asking, what's an example of what the UN would go in and say to a school that they have to teach? Because there are many things.
So I'll give you an example. They will teach the gendered narrative that domestic violence is primarily committed against women. That's one. That's like a holy. That's like a like there's certain beliefs that every ideology has. That is one of them. And another one will be that the education of women and girls is of primary importance over boys.
And they really teach it's primary importance. It's not to bring them up to the same standard of education. So because
they try to say that the boys are being educated and the girls are not, but actually often that isn't the case.
Okay,
that's not true.
And that depends on the country.
Yes, I missed the.
For which? Where?
I missed the beginning of the conversation.
any. I mean, you're just making such, preposterous
Okay, so
claims.
challenge her on where she does. Ask it. Give an
Okay, so let's talk about India. Okay, let's talk about what one might do on the ground. There's a big gap in the education between men and women. And when a woman is educated, the child gets educated better. When the woman controls small means of production, she can feed her children better. You do the next generation better. So that's nothing about feminism.
No, but what I'm trying to tell you is even if that were true, what is going on in places like India, and I know this is going on in India because I know the men's rights guys from India. I have met them numerous times and they have told me this and I have read stuff, but as I told you before, I have the knowledge and the not an expert, but I have enough to discuss the UK and the West, okay? Now the guys from India I know on a personal level and I have read stuff about them, okay, and what they promote. And they tell me that this is happening in India. In some of the poorer places in India, the UN, a lot of the NGOs that they sponsor or fund and other organisations under the umbrella, okay, go into these places and say, for us to improve the education of your women and girls or whatever, or to do this work, and you have to then sign up to certain things that are feminist, that promote feminism. That 100% is happening in India.
Can I say something which I think is it strikes me as a bit strange. So there is rank sexism in certain countries. There are certain countries where women are oppressed. They're not allowed to travel without permission from their male guardian. So if you look at some of the Arab Muslim countries in the Middle East, a woman can't leave her home without permission. So that is an example of where there is rank sexism. And if you were talking about the UK and you had a sign here saying, in the West, women have equality, I think many people would stand with you and you say, absolutely, women have fought for equality and men have fought for the equality of women, and you're in a position where you've had a great education, you're very articulate.
I haven't had a great education.
Okay, you come across as very eloquent and articulate.
I'm self-educated now.
That's fine, but you're literate.
This country did not give me a great education.
You're
I push back against that.
You're literate, you're eloquent. You are not. You can read the sign that you're holding, and so there are women in the world who aren't as privileged as you.
Yeah.
And if feminists in the West actually stood up in solidarity with women who are actually oppressed in developing countries, yeah, please.
This point comes up all the time. I have already said to you, this guy, that feminism is creeping into these countries and saying via organisations that are sponsored by like the UN and saying, do this, and in return you have to promote certain beliefs of feminism. We're going to bring in our feminist, our lecturer who is a feminist, blah blah blah. That is happening already.
And are you talking all feminism? Are you talking all streams of feminist thought?
Yes.
So even from the
all
first wave, second wave, Marxism, whatever the stream of feminism.
All of it believes in the same foundational belief that men have oppressed women or inherently oppressed them via different means and have done for the last 100 years or throughout humanity. That is the same belief that all types of feminism agree with. So moving on from that for a second, if you're going to ask me about what happens with sexism or genuine oppression in
men
other
oppressing
countries,
women in those countries.
yes,
Yeah.
well,
yeah.
we'll caveat that for a second, right? Then I will say that they don't need feminism, they need rights, human rights perhaps, or they need to look at things in a more egalitarian manner. And they do not need feminism, because feminism is the belief that men have oppressed women, and in those countries there's a very similar dynamic that we have discussed already that is going on there too.
Are men oppressing women?
When you look at a woman being treated a certain way in those countries, look at the man. What is happening to him? So if you have an arranged marriage or a forced marriage, everyone always cares about the woman. What about the man? Is he not being forced into marriage too? Why do we not care about him?
So in many of these countries, the man chooses. The man chooses, the woman doesn't. You're
No, actually, that's not true.
Okay, Saudi Arabia.
That
Take
is not
Saudi
true.
Arabia. Take Iran. Take any of these nations.
Those are different countries.
Yeah, I'm giving
Which ones are you
examples.
talking
I
about?
said Iran, take Saudi Arabia or Iran.
Yeah.
And the guardianship concept. The woman has far less autonomy than the man in those situations. It's for the husband or the father, before the husband or the father to actually sign off whether a woman's married. The male often has more
Can I
agency
ask you
than
a
the
favour,
female.
though? I
Please.
don't want to talk about Islam.
But it's an
speaking-
example
No,
of
listen.
male oppression.
No, okay. The reason why is hello, we're at Speaker's Corner,
And we're speaking.
and this place has always got lots of people who talk about Islam, right? So if you want to talk about Islam and how they treat women, you should go to the source. I am not an expert on that, and so I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to go into a long ass fucking debate about that.
But it's
and
an
then
example
they start coming
of
over here. I don't want to.
Irrespective of Muslims here, there are examples of men that
They
oppress
will
women
probably-
culturally,
they will probably
and you
say
will
to
accept
you-
that.
They will probably no.
You won't. So a woman not allowed to leave her home without.
She has primarily been promoting the narrative that feminism isn't the problem. You know, there's no need for it in the Western world.
Okay, but that's because we've got to a certain place where we have equality. I would say in many instances I am disadvantaged to you in the West.
In those countries, they don't need feminism. They need like egalitarianism.
You're just plain semantics
No,
now.
that's not semantics. They are completely different.
So I think it's completely wrong. I think when a woman gets some source of microcredit,
Right.
able to borrow a small amount of money on her home to do for animal husbandry or to do her handicraft, to get some health care, to have some control over her body, to feed her children. That's not feminism. We are actually talking about the same thing. So that's not feminism. That's not right to say that that's being feminism.
You have to be able to afford it.
That's what the UN is going there saying, here's some money, please take our feminism for the money.
That's
why
not
I'm saying
feminism.
that.
That's the egalitarianism that you're talking about. Because it directly affects the survival of their children.
Exactly. So they need something else, not feminism.
But don't call that feminism. The
No, I
UN is
didn't call that feminism. I didn't.
Well, I pointed out to you that you're saying that the institutions have been deeply corrupted by feminists.
What they do is they offer them something they need, and then they say, "You're
That's
not
a conspiracy.
listening."
Don't
You
throw
said to
words
me-
at me.
You said to me, that is not feminism, and I'm telling you what's going on. Is the feminists go to these countries and they say, "We will give you something that you need in return."
Simply not true.
I'm sure that there is a human rights,
That
United
100%
Nations Women's
is
Rights
happening,
Council. There is.
Okay, and you are lying if you say that is not true.
Can I ask which of this statement don't you agree with? I'm just going to read out a statement.
I don't want to talk about Islam.
No, nothing to do with Islam.
You've got Zionists on the
Because I'm Jewish.
Yeah,
Advocating.
I know, but eventually we start talking about Islam.
Nothing to do with it. It's a
Okay,
separate
good,
religion.
good.
Advocating for women's rights on the ground of equality of the sexes. Advocating for women's rights on the grounds of equality of the sexes.
Okay.
What do you disagree with that statement? Advocating for women's rights on the grounds of equality of the sexes.
That is a statement that feminists try to say represents them.
What I'm saying,
Their
do you disagree
belief-
with that statement?
Non-feminist.
Do you disagree with advocating for rights? Advocating for rights of women. Advocating for women's rights on the grounds of equality of the sexes. Do you disagree with that?
Depends on what the definition of equality of the sexes is. My
Equality of
definition-
opportunity, let's say.
We already have equality of
Okay, but for women that don't, or historically in the past when you didn't, do you disagree with that statement?
Historically in the past, men also did not have equality of
I
opportunity.
agree. I'm not arguing for
there
that.
we go.
I'm saying, so class equality is
So
a very
what I'm
important
saying
thing.
is that
The equality for the lower
semantics
classes
of
to have a
that
vote.
question are extremely important.
Oh, sorry.
The last point on that statement, where you're saying Read it again.
Okay, advocating for women's rights on the grounds of equality of the sexes.
Okay, so it's the belief about what the equality of the sexes is.
The right to vote, the right to education, basic equalities that we take for granted in this country, that thank God that you have and I have. I come from a working class community in the north of England, you're a female, we can both vote. That's fantastic. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking equality of the sexes. In other countries that doesn't exist. Women can't vote. Women don't have access to the same education.
I'm going to complicate this for a second and say that yeah, exactly. Some of those men in those countries can't vote either. But
how do you have
But that's a different argument. And we would advocate that they have the right to vote if it's based on class or something else, or religion, so certain religions will be discriminated. I've read you the Oxford definition of what feminism is, because it's an umbrella statement that catches many, many different sentiments. And so many people here would agree with you on things like third wave feminism, the movement to trans and gender.
So can I interrupt?
Dictionary definitions.
Getting into the definition about the equality, the last point of that.
Yeah, equality of the sexes.
Right? The feminists believe that men have always oppressed women throughout human history.
So I would agree with you and say men haven't. Men have fought for women, defended women.
All types of feminism, both, third, second, first, they believe that too.
So if you're talking various radical streams where they say that, but that's not what the definition statement says. Nowhere in there does it say the belief that men oppress women. It's not in that definition.
Because we live in the age where the dictionary is, like, if you go on Wikipedia...
I'm going to the Oxford Dictionary, not Wikipedia.
The Oxford Dictionary is having the same problem as Wikipedia.
But it's not. The Oxford Dictionary is put together by academics. Wikipedia is put together by idiots like me.
Academics who study at institutions controlled by feminists.
The institutions aren't controlled by feminists. Feminism is an ideology, and it comes. Anti-people who.
It's a worldview as well, right?
I wouldn't say it's a world. I mean, it could be a worldview.
Well,
Yeah,
if
you put feminism first, then yes, it is.
Because intersectionality, for example, right, believes.
There are feminists who don't believe in intersectionality.
They all agree that men oppress women.
That's not what that definition from Oxford said. You say that.
Not factual.
I've done that already, and I'll do it again. 1 second. So this is where they get you. This is what I'm trying to say. If you read anything that feminists have written, they all believe that. Every single one of them. All streams. Every single one, from the suffragettes to now. All of them.
Do me a favour.
Do I have to keep saying it?
Do me a favour.
Which feminists explicitly?
All of them.
No, name some of them.
Can I ask?
All of them.
Name some of them.
Pankhurst, Jermaine Greer.
One of the things I normally say is that all the different types of feminism, from Marxist feminism, Trotskyite feminist, sex positive, lesbian feminism, all the rest of it, they all have the same root, which is the patriarchal theory.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
That they all share.
Root is the same.
That they believe men oppress women.
And I disagree with the root.
Can I ask for something?
Yes, please.
I'd like to ask. Could you speak for me without using the word feminist for a while about behaviour, systems of oppression, and how you believe that you have a different.
Are you a Marxist? Sure.
I'm here.
Can you answer me first?
I am here. So that is my answer to the question.
The Zionist, the Marxist, the Muslim.
You are happy to wear a shirt saying that, mate. So.
Yeah, and my statement is I am here.
I want to know first.
Am I a Marxist? My statement
to
that is
I
am here. Obviously not. If I'm not willing to say yes or no, and I'm going to say I am here, then that is the way that I'm going to define myself. That is the way I'm going to define myself.
Speaker's Corner is just full of Marxist heckling, and then they turn the conversation to Marxism.
I made a very simple request. There's no heckling involved. I made a very simple request.
Made
a very simple request.
Are you a Marxist?
I'd like to give you a no.
Next! Please, next, someone else. Someone who would like to have
an open
and genuine conversation where he admits his principles or beliefs. If I ask him, I do not have conversations with people who do that.
I don't feel like I understand the term enough to identify with it. Well, I don't know if I understand the term enough to identify with it.
Are you a postmodernist?
Look, I don't understand the question. I do not understand the question. What I know is I'm here, and what I'd like is I'd like you to speak without using the word feminism and talk about the behaviour. Talk about the behaviour of oppression and how you have an idea.
That's where Marx is shooting.
You have an idea about this is Fern. This is Fern. She is our own being. Yeah, just that. Could you speak about systems of oppression and how you? Because you're saying that you have an idea that men oppress women. Men oppress women is unfactual.
What do you eat? What did you have for breakfast?
Without attacking an ideology that's really hard to define. I'd like to.
Too much sugar though.
Do they not oppress each other?
That's a very sexist question. You asked her what she cooked this morning.
Oh yeah!
Can you make sandwiches?
For example, can I add something?
Thank you. Let's move
I'm
on.
from Spain and I'm a non-feminist because I'm against abortion. And for example, I think that men and women are different, but are like have the same. Are the same in fact, but different because we are born different and we are like the same rights. But women are women and men, and we should not be against us. And for example, women against men because we were born for being like friends and for to form families. And that's the fact that I think that feminism tries that women are against men, and also that women should be angry with humanity and think that we are always offended. And I don't think that.
Can we have a round of applause for this lady? We have non-feminist women in our vicinity. Thank you very much for being here.
There are lots
I am so happy you exist. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for manifesting yourself.
I think what she's saying is that men and women are interdependent on each other. Interdependent, and they have a equal amount of influence, but in different ways.
Yeah, that we should complement each other,
because
of course we're different, and I think that women have lots of
and
positive
do you agree
things.
that has always been the case?
No, there have been I think that during history there have been lots of inequalities, and women sometimes have been mistreated.
But do you think that when a woman has been mistreated, do you think that sometimes there has been an equivalent mistreatment of men happening too?
For example, I think that right now men are not treated with equality, because I think that sometimes that you are forced to do things that are in your nature. For example, I think that sometimes, I love my father, and sometimes my father is seen badly because he's talked with force, and I don't know,
So you're talking about masculinity being attacked?
Yes, sometimes. I think
I
that
agree.
the strong feminism is mistreating the man nature, and well, of course, I love being a woman. A woman I love myself, and I love men too. But I think we should enforce our own our own characteristics, and don't be afraid of being women, and don't be afraid of being men. No, that's what
I agree. Thank you very much for your comments.
Has with that is toxic masculinity. When people
I'm standing against that, but be quiet with the toxic masculinity.
Sorry, what are you saying?
So, okay, no, but statistically, look at terrorists, look at rapists. They are men, and it's not. And feminism isn't here to say, oh, men can't be men. It's to say to them that it's not. It wasn't though. It was when saying that men shouldn't feel like they have to hide pieces of their personality because it isn't masculine, because it makes them look weaker. People should be allowed to.
Okay, can I stop you there? Right. I'm going to go on a slightly different, still on the subject, but you said that men shouldn't feel like they have to change. Say it again, sorry.
They shouldn't have to hide aspects of their personality because they seem weaker or
Men
less masculine.
have to hide aspects of their personality because they seem weak and not very masculine.
Yes.
Okay. So, just go think about it for a second. Who are men pleasing when they feel like they have to change themselves to be more masculine or less? Other men.
Themselves.
So, do you not think that there's a possibility? One second. Do you think? Do you think that it's only about other men?
Yes.
You don't think that women have any influence in this whatsoever? Nothing.
Of course, some women have influence in everything.
Some
so-
women. Some women. Just some.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Because my understanding from human behaviour and the way that we choose our mates is that women generally prefer more masculine characteristics in men. And masculine, we can have a conversation about the definition of masculine because that's quite difficult. That's quite difficult. At these days, it's quite a difficult conversation to have about what is masculine and what isn't. But I'm saying that there is lots of evidence out there that women are like, this is like a marketplace, right? A man is out there saying, hey, you know, I am competing in the market of life. I am competing in the hierarchy with other men. The underlying reason why they're competing is so they can be selected by women.
That might be the reason, but so do you agree that men shouldn't have to act more masculine or act more aggressive?
I think men
and they
should act how
should.
the fuck they want to act.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Just like women.
Does that include violence? Does that include violence and aggressive behaviour? Because that's you sometimes considered masculine.
Is masculine always aggressive?
Not always. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that is part of it, isn't it?
Here we go. There is now you're making the implication that masculine equals aggression.
I did not say that's an aspect of it.
It's an aspect of it.
Testosterone is naturally given to aggression if it's not, like if the intellect isn't involved in the passion, then it becomes aggression.
It's also a biological necessity. In times of conflict and when people are under threat, it's the men that go to war and defend society.
Of testosterone. Apart from being more
survival, masculine features of biology. I don't know.
Do you not think it has
Strength.
anything to do with increasing your capacity to think logically in the brain?
I would argue against that.
Really?
Yes, I would. I would say between men and women. I would say, sorry, I haven't finished. I would say between men and women, I don't see that testosterone levels give over to logic more easily than feminine hormones.
I would say from our interaction before, maybe you're right.
I would say there are studies out there that go completely against that. There is evidence out there to suggest that is true, yes. There have been studies done about that. Well, I'll talk to you later about that if you want to. Do you agree that women tend to express their emotions, or at least use their emotions in their thinking, in their decision making more than men do?
I don't know all women, but I would say yes.
Okay.
Logic doesn't preclude emotion. Emotion can bring you to a place of a different reasoning, to a different logic.
But then you need logic to help make the decision, right?
Of course you do, but I'm saying logic doesn't preclude emotion. Everybody has emotion. Men are just taught from a young age to suppress the emotion.
The decision-making process. If you make a decision,
emotion in a decision-making process. Yes.
No, I said, do women use emotions more in the decision-making process than men?
But they are known to use them.
They're
Because
pros.
that's the thing out by men, that women are too emotional.
Is it that though, or is it just that women get away with being more emotional?
They get away with, or
Yeah.
is it like a risque thing?
That's where I want to come back to you. This is what I'm trying to say. There are certain traits and characteristics in men, right, that women prefer, and we have lots of studies.
If I was to start crying now, would people all sympathise with me?
Stereotypical representation of what masculinity is. Women,
Women like sensitive men, quote unquote.
have studies and evidence that
Men are different in different countries. They're expected to be different things, and so are women.
Majority of women, not a minority, majority.
That's the point. We're talking in general. It's not. I mean, we are talking in general.
Of course. When I make points like this, that means that I have seen evidence, like a study, and a study usually needs a certain amount of parameters in a certain way to be, legitimate, right? Okay. And I have seen that. There's many other books out there. For example, The Evolution of Desire is a good one. And you've got another source material that can show this chick and this lady here. You know, there's plenty of it out there, is what I'm saying. So when I make this point, I'm saying to you that it's not just one study that proves this, there's numerous.